That's okay.
All right. Okay. All right. Let me turn on my microphone. The microphone isn't amazing, but I'll speak loudly and try to stay close to you, and we should be in good shape. So welcome. My name is Amara Dunn Silver. I am the biocontrol specialist for the New York State IPM program. And today we are talking about beneficial insects and how we feed and attract them to especially our fruit, right? Because they can do a lot of great things for our fruit. So, just as a starting point, when I say beneficial insects, what are some examples that come to mind? Parasitic wasps, ladybugs. Do you like a sticker?
Sure.
Who said ladybugs?
Lacewing.
Lacewings. Yeah. What other beneficial insects? Any pollinators, which is a lot of bugs. Yeah, flies, bees. I think I'd heard hoverflies back here. Dragonflies. All right. So yeah, we have lots of beneficial insects. And these beneficial insects include both pollinators and natural enemies of pests. And both are going to be useful in when we're thinking about cultivating fruits in our home gardens, because so many fruit crops rely on pollinators, otherwise you don't get any fruits. It's not like Swiss chard or kale where it's going to grow leaves and you're all set. So we definitely need pollinators. And then these natural enemies of pests, things that eat pests or parasitize them, are going to help us with our pest control and help keep those pest populations in check. So I'm going to invite folks to take one of these pieces of paper and pass it along to the next person. These are some pictures of beneficial insects, and we're going to go through and talk about them because I suspect that even in a small group like this, there's probably someone here who knows what all of these are, even if not, even if each person doesn't know what every single one of them is. So if you flip the paper over so that the part with the white spot at the bottom is on the back, so the front part is without the white patch at the bottom, that first row of insects there, what are those? Bees, yeah. So the honeybee is the first one on the left. That's a pretty easily recognizable bee. And then we have a bumblebee in the middle. Does anyone recognize the bee on the right? I don't know what it is. So if you know, is it a sweat bee? I honestly, I don't know. Um, so the bee on the right is to remind all of you that we have a huge diversity of native bees in New York State. And while when we think of bees, the easiest ones to recognize and the ones that may come to mind first are things like honeybees and bumblebees, there's also just an incredible diversity of native bees. Many of them are solitary bees. They nest by themselves. Those solitary bees are incredibly unlikely to sting you ever, because if that solitary bee stings you and dies, its offspring are without food, right? So it would much rather escape from you than sting you. Whereas a bee that lives in a colony, it is willing to sacrifice itself for its colony, and so it may sting you. Um, and these other bees, besides honeybees and bumblebees and carpenter bees, they come in so many different shapes and sizes and colors. There are green ones and bronze ones and black ones and stripy ones and really tiny ones and bigger ones. It's really a fun thing to watch once you start looking. And as we learn more about these bees, one of the things we're realizing is that a lot of these solitary bees seem like they could actually be better pollinators of, for example, apple trees than honeybees. Even though we've got moving honeybees in to pollinate the apple trees, if we were taking care of the native bees, we might get even better pollination. These native bees are just they're good at carrying pollen, they're good at moving pollen around, even though they're tiny. What about that next row? Lady beetles, yeah. So the one in the middle is probably the most classic lady beetle. It's got that round lady beetle shape and black spots and red body. That's a seven-spotted lady beetle. Does anyone recognize the lady beetle on the right with the black M on its forehead? It's not native. Actually, the seven-spotted lady beetle isn't native either. But that one with the M on its head is a multicolored Asian lady beetle. Those are the lady beetles that get in your house in the wintertime. They like to congregate. They like to get into small spaces and find warm places. And outside, they're still predators. Their larvae eat aphids. The adult eat aphids. So I think of them as beneficial insects because they are still natural enemies of pests, but they can be pests inside. They can be irritating. They can also be pests in vineyards if they get into the grape clusters. They give an off flavor to the wine, which is apparently if you ever swished one, they have kind of an odd smell, and if you can imagine drinking that, it's not desirable. Apparently, I don't know why. Um, but yeah, they're still predators. And then the lady beetle on the left is one of my favorites. That's a pink spotted lady beetle. It's not a classic lady beetle shape. I think it looks more like a spotted cucumber beetle, just like the shape of its body. But this is a native lady beetle species that, in addition to feeding on aphids and other insects as a predator, it also feeds on pollen. And so in this case, it's probably looking for pollen on the dandelion flower, but you can also find them on other flowers that produce lots of pollen too. What about that next row down? Sorry, what?
That's the babies.
It's the baby lady beetles. Yes, well done. So I like to include pictures of the immature lady beetles, the larvae, which are the first two pictures, and then the pupa, which is the one all the way on the right. So the larvae is a crawling stage, and those are predators. They're going to be eating aphids and other small insects. And then the pupal stage is a resting stage. It's just hanging out on a leaf or some other surface in your garden, and it's about to turn into an adult lady beetle. And it's important to be able to recognize lady beetles in all of their life stages so that you don't accidentally mistake one of the life stages for a pest. In particular, I know some people have said, oh, that pupa looks a little bit like a Colorado potato beetle. And so obviously those are very different insects, right? You want to squish the Colorado potato beetle, you don't want to squish the ladybug pupa.
They're eggs really similar. So like you look on the bottom side of a potato leaf and you see like bright yellow or orange eggs. It could be either one.
Actually, you might have asked me this question. I was like, someone asked me a question about Colorado potato beetle eggs and lady beetle eggs. Maybe it was you. Okay, well then I heard it from someone else. Um, so yeah, and I think I looked at pictures and they are pretty similar, the look of the eggs. Um, uh, Someone from the last group, who's an entomologist, pointed out that lady beetles are going to lay their eggs where their young can find lots of food. Especially, they will lay their eggs on a plant that has lots of aphids on it because they want their young to have a food source. So that could be one clue. Like if you're looking on a potato leaf and there's aphids on the potato leaf, it might be lady beetle eggs or it might be Colorado potato beetle eggs. If you have no aphids on your potatoes and you're seeing those eggs, maybe it's a higher chance. I don't know for sure, but it's a reasonable idea. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to be really cautious, you could take the leaf off and try to hatch the eggs out. And then if they hatch and they're lady beetles, you can put them back on the potatoes. And if they hatch and they're Colorado potato beetles, you can squish them. I don't know how hard it is to hatch either lady beetle or Colorado potato beetle eggs, but you're right, it might be fun if it works. What about that next row down? Hoverflies, yes. And again, I have pictures of adults and of a larva. And I will confess that this larval picture, I don't 100% know that it's a hoverfly larva. I am not great at fly maggot ID. So that's what a larval fly is. It's a maggot. And there are a variety of predatory flies whose larvae, flies whose larvae are predatory, right? And hoverflies, syrphid flies, which the adults are pictured here, are one type that's really easy to recognize. So that larva might not be a hoverfly larva, but hoverfly larvae look relatively similar to that. The hoverfly adults come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are thinner, some of them are fatter. And they often are black and yellow striped or have a black and orange coloration that kind of mimics a bee. But you can tell them apart because they have those really big eyes that take up their whole head. And they only have 2 wings, where bees would have 4 wings. Now, insects don't always oblige and hold still long enough to count their wings, but if you get a chance to count their wings, that's one way to tell them apart. So these hoverflies, the adults actually just eat pollen. They're not predatory. So, but they're pollinators, and I think they're kind of friendly. They sort of fly around and hover and then swing somewhere else and hover. And if you've been sweating a lot, they might come and land on your arm because you've got salt on your skin. And then the larvae are the ones that are doing the biocontrol work, eating the aphids and other insects. What about that insect at the very bottom of the front page? It's very tiny. It is a bug. It's no more than 1/4 of an inch long, and it has this really interesting black and white pattern on it. And this one is a minute pirate bug. They are a little bit hard to see unless you know what you're looking for. And I most often see them on flowers like sunflowers or cosmos that have a lot of pollen at their center, and then those big petals where the insects show up really well against the bright colored petals. So minute pirate bugs, in addition to being great predators, they will also feed on pollen, which is why you sometimes find them on flowers that have a lot of pollen. And sometimes when I cut flowers and bring them inside, the next morning I'll find the minute pirate bugs on the tablecloth because they've fallen out of the flowers. They are great at eating thrips, and sometimes you'll find them in marigolds. Sometimes you also find thrips in marigolds. I don't know if the minute pirate bugs are eating the thrips or the pollen or both. And then they'll eat aphids and other small things too because they are very tiny. They will sometimes try to find out if you're tasty, and it pinches just for a minute, but it's not bad. All right, go ahead and flip your paper over. What about those insects in the top row there? Lacewings, yeah. So again, lacewing larvae look very different from lacewing adults. And once we circulate around, I'm going to actually show you some lacewing eggs that someone found in the last group, which is pretty cool. We have a few different species of lacewings. Some are green, some are brown. The larvae are all predators, and some of the adults are predators. Other adults eat just pollen. What about the next row? Spiders and harvestmen. So we have the yellow and black garden spider. They're generalist predators and all sorts of insects. The harvestmen or daddy longlegs are also predatory. Depending on the species, they might be more on the ground, or sometimes they're up on the foliage a little bit. And what about that next row? Wasps. And specifically, these wasps are vespid wasps. So the vespid wasps include yellow jackets, paper wasps, hornets. All of the wasps that live in colonies and sting you are vespids. And if the wasps if their nest is in a place where it is in conflict with people, where they're posing a sting risk, then they're a pest, and you have to do something about them. And New York City IPM has a lot of great resources about some strategies for handling wasps. However, if the wasps are in a place where they're not posing a risk to people, where you don't have someone around who's highly allergic, I encourage folks to leave them alone. And that's because these wasps, in addition to utilizing sugar sources, you'll see them visiting flowers, and you'll see them visiting fruit that's a little bit overripe. They also need to provide some protein sources to their young, and caterpillars are a great source of protein. So these vespid wasps are going to be catching caterpillars in your garden. And we could all use with fewer caterpillars in general. A lot of caterpillars are pests in our gardens. So if the wasps aren't bothering you, I do encourage you to leave them. And then in that last row are just some other wasps, other large wasps, I think is what I would call them. Some of them are predators, also like the vespids. Other are parasitoids, so they're going to be laying an egg in or on another insect, and then their young will eat that insect from the inside out and fill it that way. There are also very tiny parasitoid wasps that I didn't put on here because they're so hard to see. But you can sometimes see the evidence of a tiny parasitoid wasp. So if you've ever seen a sort of inflated brown aphid, that's the result of a parasitoid. So it's a little tiny wasp that laid an egg in an aphid, and then the aphid puffs up and turns brown as it's killed. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to send you on an insect scavenger hunt because we've chatted about recognizing some of the beneficial insects, and now we want to talk about what those insects need in terms of food sources and shelter. So we have over here kind of some traditional bedding plants, and there's squash. There's some more of them over here, and then in that back corner there are some perennial plants and some weeds. So I encourage you to take a look. Pause for a few minutes, look closely, see what insects you can find in those places. I will circulate around and answer some questions and look too, and then we'll come back and have a conversation. And I will also bring the lacewing eggs around so you can take a look. You want to just follow me around?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Sorry. I've been trying to show people. Oh, they're so cute.
There's little white eggs on those long stalks.
Mm-hmm. That's
Really
awesome.
so nice. I don't think I've ever seen them in real life.
Yeah. They're so cute.
Yeah, so
I think I learned from you that they do that so that little caterpillars or whatever going by don't encounter them. They're like up above.
well, what is hypothesized is so lacewing larvae are cannibalistic, and so the thought is that putting them on these stalks separates them from each other. So when they hatch, they're more likely to crawl away and eat something else before they eat each other. That makes sense. It's a hypothesis. It's a little hard to test, but it's our best guess.
Being at that workshop about the weeds, I kind of just want to pull these that are going to seed.
Go for it. I'm sure no one.
There's a fly right here. There's nothing on it. What have we got there?
Oh,
Really? He didn't look hard.
Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah. That's awesome.
Like a sundrop?
Ooh, maybe. Oh, the bulbous thing there?
So, lavender certainly is definitely a big effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Usually, I think that's sundrop. I think the yellow bird. Yeah.
You know, listen,
It's a
like,
compulsion,
it's like,
right?
I gotta get that.
Well, fuck it, there's another one.
Did you all? We was just talking about weed. I have to pull it out.
What'd you find over there?
Weeds.
He's
Weeds,
reading.
yeah. Yeah, that flower there, that's
Should we
pretty.
just look up, it looks like there's confusion somewhere.
There's an air. Yeah, I read somewhere that they go to Marigold. And it's good about the larva are underground and it's the marigolds, I think, that are.
Oh. But I think that my understanding is that it's plant marigolds material where there are nematodes because of the nematode population. Up there, next year you'll have less nematodes.
Oh,
I think if you're planting a nematode special crop next to marigold,
we're trying to figure out if marigold.
It's 3:10. I forget what time. 3:08. 3:08.
all right, let's move back over here.
I think we are, yeah.
We started late.
We can be flexible. All right, if you were in Amara's last beneficial insect group, we're finishing up over here, and then I'll be back for the new group in just a moment. So what did you notice about insects in these perennials versus insects in these bedding plants? There's a lot more insects over here, right? And it's not that bedding plants are all bad, right? You know, these plants are providing other important benefits. They look beautiful, right? They've been selected to look beautiful. They haven't been selected to feed insects and provide shelter. And so it's important that if you are thinking about selecting plants that are going to feed pollinators and natural enemies, that you're mindful about your plant choices. So just because it has a flower doesn't mean it's going to feed insects. The good news is that there has been so much emphasis on protecting pollinators, feeding pollinators, that it's going to be really pretty easy to find plants that feed pollinators. And most plants that feed pollinators will also feed natural enemies of pests. So that's like a really easy, basic way to look for plants that are going to feed beneficial insects. I also have a lot of resources on your CICAM website if you want to dig deeper into all of that as well. Any questions before I send you off to your last station? I found the exhibit. Oh, yes. I think they're squashbuck eggs. The lady beetle eggs will be more common. Yeah, so feel free to squish them. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But I used that
The CPAP.
yeah, it's picture.
Okay. Yeah. So I heard there are also some lily leaf beetles over here. If anyone hasn't seen any, they decimate lilies. They are beautiful red beetles, but they eat lilies. The good news is that there's been releases of a parasitoid that will attack the lily leaf beetle larvae, I believe. And they're actually starting to see some good impacts in New England. The first releases were done in Rhode Island, Massachusetts. They think they're starting to see some declines in those beetle populations. They've done a few releases in New York State. I think not as many, but hopefully over time, we'll eventually bring that pest into balance and we can grow lilies again. All right. Thank you all for your questions. If you would like a sticker or temporary tattoos before you leave, come see me at the table. I have more of them.